the district attorney spoke, and she and Comfort, or I forget the exact name, service dog in training was there. So she is coming to talk about her own department. You may have noticed that Gary Bondi, our little sir, is not here today. He had scalp surgery the other day and was in a lot of pain and didn't feel he was up to coming. Plus, I know from personal experiences, the bandages are really ugly and held on with paper with hair clips, not a manly look. So that's why he is absent today. I think unless there are any other activity reports that we must listen to, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mark Burchill, who is going to introduce our guest speaker today. And I presume our guest speaker is online. Looks like it.
Thank you. When Steve Taddei was 7 years old, he read that his hero, Willie Mays, played in the Negro Leagues before he came to the Giants. Steve's first thought was that the Negro Leagues must be a superior league. Any league that had Willie had to be better than the league that didn't. Steve learned later that the Negro Leagues existed because Major League Baseball's color barrier didn't allow Mays or other African Americans to play in the majors. Today, Steve is going to talk about leadership lessons he's learned reading about individuals who use passion, camaraderie, and grit to make history. Steve is a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest award a Toastmaster can receive. He was district director for the San Francisco East and North Bay region of Toastmasters, and that's where I met him almost a decade ago. Steve's an account executive with Ocean Breeze Healthcare and currently hosts a weekly radio show about the Negro Leagues on the 365 Sportcast Network. Steve lives in Alameda with his wife, Catherine, and please let's welcome Steve Taddei.
Good afternoon, sirs. I would like, just give me a thumbs up if you hear me okay.
Great.
Good. All right. Terrific. I would like to introduce all of you to Mr. Buck O'Neill.
I've been a lot of places. I've done a lot of things that I really like doing. I hit the home run. I hit the Grand Slam home run. I hit for the cycle. I've had a hole-in-one in golf. I've done a lot of things I like doing. I shook hands with President Truman. Yeah. So, oh, man. I shook, with the other president, and I happened to hug his wife, Hillary. So I've done a lot of things I like doing, but I'd rather be right here, right now, representing these people that help build the bridge across the chasm of prejudice, not just the ones like Charlie Pride and me that laid across them. Yeah, this is quite an honor for me. See, I played in the Negro Leagues. Tell you what, the Negro Leagues was nothing like Hollywood tried to make it. The Negro Leagues was the third largest black business in this country. Yeah. First, black insurances, the white insurances, 10-cent policy, just enough to bury us. But the black insurance.
Have you ever heard so much joy in somebody's speech? Somebody who was so jubilant, somebody who was absolutely jazzed. Thank you, Mark, for the great introduction, and thank everyone at SIRS for having me today. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am a baseball fanatic. Now, I know not everybody's a baseball fan, so I did a little bit of research before we got together. I called Gary Bondi, and he told me that we've got some sports people in here. I saw Jim get up, and I heard that Jim was a high school football player, track star, wrestled, and now he handles the golf. I heard that Rich Lambert played high school and college tennis, and I heard that Fred Rose was a three-sport athlete and an outstanding baseball player. Now, not everybody likes sports, but I'm hoping that what we can talk about today through the vehicle of baseball, we can talk about some great life lessons that you can learn through the athletes from Negro League Baseball. So why was Buck O'Neil so jazzed? Why was he so juiced? Why was he so jubilant? Well, he was speaking on behalf of 17 of his contemporaries, 17 Negro League ball players who had just been elected to the Hall of Fame. Now, as happy as Buck O'Neil was, what you may not have heard in his voice or in his actions, how awkward the moment was. Many of his friends were angry. Many of his friends were astonished that Buck O'Neil missed getting into the Hall of Fame by a single vote. A single vote. So with all that going on, why was Buck O'Neil so happy? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Buck. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of other people, and you'll probably get the idea. So who's Buck O'Neil? Buck O'Neil was born in Sarasota, Florida in 1911. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs. He was a great first baseman in the 1930s. He left, joined the Army, and served our country in World War II. Came back after his service, played another year at first base, and then became the Kansas City Monarchs manager. When Jackie Robinson integrated Major League Baseball in 1947, shortly thereafter, Buck O'Neil became a scout for the Chicago Cubs. He was very instrumental in bringing in Ernie Banks from the Negro Leagues to the Chicago Cubs. Banks spent his whole career with the Cubs, hit over 500 home runs, was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame himself, and is forever known as Mr. Cub. Buck O'Neil then became the first African-American coach on the field when, under manager Leo DeRocher, Buck O'Neil was a first base coach in the 1960s. Well, the leadership lesson from Buck O'Neil is essentially from that great book years ago, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And author Jim Covey gave the advice, or Steve Covey gave the advice, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And for Buck O'Neil, he never took his eye off the ball. The main thing for Buck O'Neil was preserving the history and the memories of Negro League Baseball. How was he doing that? Well, he did it 2 ways. The first way was his dream and his hope that his contemporaries would be elected to the Hall of Fame. His second way was to do everything he could to have a thriving, functioning Negro League Baseball Museum. So upon his retirement from coaching, he collaborated with everybody he could. One person he collaborated with is, if you're a baseball fan, you may have heard of Frank White, who was a second baseman for the Kansas City Royals during the 1970s and the 1980s. Buck O'Neil and Frank White took their own money, rented office space, just so they could store Negro League memorabilia in a Kansas City location. They stored it for several years. paid for it out of their pocket, and then they would give these little tours. You could make an appointment and take a tour through this office space. And it was 1994 when the Negro League Baseball Museum opened up in its current location on 18th and Vine. And I'm going to see if I can share the screen here.
Yours?
The Negro League Baseball Museum on 18th and Vine. Now, because of COVID, the baseball museum has kind of stayed on my bucket list. I can't get out there right now. I'm not doing a lot of airline traveling. But what I have done is I've gone to this website, nlbm.com. You can go on there. You can take a virtual tour. You can watch videos. You can learn everything you'd like to learn about the Hall of Famers that Buck O'Neil was so proud of. And you can learn, you can see everything there is to see on different memorabilia, different history of Negro League Baseball. So while during Buck O'Neil's lifetime, making the Hall of Fame would have been one of those things that's nice, the main thing was the history and the memories were preserved. Buck O'Neil passed away in October, 4 months after that passionate speech he made. But I believe he went to his final resting place knowing that the memories and the history were being preserved. Now, oh, by the way, history took care of Buck. And this last December, Buck O'Neil posthumously was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And he will be inducted this upcoming July in Cooperstown. Now, did you know that there was a very strong woman's presence in Negro League Baseball? Now, that woman's presence came from a woman named Effa Manley. And there's a great book out there written by Jim Overmeyer, Queen of the Negro Leagues, Effa Manley and her Newark Eagles. Effa Manley lived in Harlem with her husband, Abe. And Effa spent most of her time as a community activist. She was a member of an organization called Citizens for Fair Play. And one of the things Citizens for Fair Play noticed was that the white-owned businesses in Harlem, whose customers were mostly African-American, they were not hiring African-American people to work on the sales floor. If you were African-American and you lived in Harlem, you might be a janitor, you might be an elevator operator, but the face of the store when the customers came in was all Caucasian. Well, Effa Manley was not afraid of anybody, and she would approach anybody and express her needs and desires. Well, one of the department stores was Bloomfield, and she made an appointment and she went and visited Mr. Bloomfield. She said right directly to him, Mr. Bloomfield, your store has a large group of African-American customers. We believe that it would be in your best interest and our community's best interest if you updated your hiring practices and you hired African-American people to work on the sales floor. Well, Bloomfield gave her pushback, gave a stock answer, and sent her on her way. Well, what he didn't realize was Effa Manley wasn't finished. Subsequently, Effa went and made contact with a local pastor. She visited Reverend John Howard Johnson, who was a pastor of a largely African-American church. Most of his congregation shopped at Bloomfield's. Well, he encouraged his members, when they shopped there, to save all of their receipts. And over the period of time, he accumulated $7,000 worth of receipts. Now, this is 1934, $7,000 worth of department store receipts. I just can't imagine what that must have been like in 1934. Well, this time, the visit to Bloom was Effa and Reverend Johnson. Mr. Bloomfield, as I mentioned before, we feel it would be in your best interest and the community's best interest if you staffed the sales floor with Negro workers. Well, he still gave the pushback and sent both of them on their way. Well, that led to a boycott called Don't Shop Where You Can't Buy. The boycott was successful. Mr. Bloomfield and other department stores updated their hiring practices, and Effa Manley and Reverend Johnson had a victory, and the community had a victory. Now, subsequently after that, Abe Manley approached Effa with the suggestion that they purchase the Brooklyn Eagles from the Negro Leagues. Well, Effa was feeling confident, which leads to the second leadership lesson that comes from Negro League figures, is the confidence you can build volunteering and serving your community. The success that Effa Manley had in helping Bloomfields update their hiring practices, if she could do that, she was confident that she could run a baseball team. So she agreed to do it, and to add to it, Effa and Abe were both incredible baseball fans who met at the 1932 World Series between the Yankees and the Cubs. They met at Yankee Stadium. So they were huge baseball fans. She was a great administrator. This was going to be perfect. Their first order of business was to move the Eagles from Brooklyn to an area they thought would be more productive, more successful, and that was Newark, New Jersey. And Effa was in charge of the administration, the finance, and the negotiations. And it was a perfect setup. She had the talent, the business acumen, and the ability to lead the Eagles and actually help the entire league get through the economic problems of the Great Depression and then the shortages that came with World War II. There were shortages of gasoline. There were shortages of rubber. If you were involved in a Negro League baseball team and you traveled by bus, gasoline and oil were essential. And she helped the whole operation get through that. It wasn't easy, but they thrived. And then finally in 1946, the Newark Eagles won the Negro League World Championship. So it was exciting times for Effa Manley, Abe Manley, and the Newark Eagles. And then 1947. And it was 1947 when Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers recruited Jackie Robinson, who at the time was playing for the Kansas City Monarchs. It was great progress for baseball. it was great progress for African-American ball players, but it was also an awkward time for the Negro Leagues, because not only did Jackie Robinson leave the Kansas City Monarchs, two other players, Hank Thompson and Sam Bankhead, left the Monarchs and went to the major leagues. J.L. Wilkinson, the owner of the Monarchs, lost his three best players, but was in no position to complain because nobody wanted to be seen as the people that were undermining the integration of Major League Baseball. Well, Effa was able to walk that fine line. She had intense meetings with Branch Rickey, intense meetings with other owners. And while she was never able to make headway with Branch Rickey, when the Cleveland Indians signed Larry Doby away from the Newark Eagles to make Larry Doby the first African-American in the American League, she got compensation from Bill Veeck, owner of the Cleveland Indians. So she made her presence known. And sometimes she came out ahead. Sometimes she didn't completely come out ahead, but she planted seeds that made sure people knew what her needs were. So Effa Manley was a true pioneer. And I'm going to share the screen one more time because I would like you to see her Hall of Fame plaque. Effa Manley is the only woman ever to be elected to the Hall of Fame. In 1952, they sold the Newark Eagles. Abe Manley passed away in 1954. Effa moved to Southern California and spent the rest of her life, much like Buck O'Neil, doing everything she could for the history and the memories of Negro League baseball. And Effa Manley passed away in 1981. So it's April 21st, and if you're speaking to a group in April of 2022, you cannot have a conversation without talking about Jackie Robinson. Last Friday was the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier when he signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Why was Jackie Robinson the one chosen? Why was Branch Rickey of the Dodgers so confident in Jackie Robinson? There were other Negro League players. If you talked with Buck O'Neil thought a player named Ted Strong was a better choice, a better player than Jackie Robinson. Pitcher Satchel Paige thought he should have been the first one. And another great player, Willard Brown, thought he should have been the first one. Well, there was a complete package with Jackie Robinson. In the 1930s, he played football at UCLA, and he helped the Bruins get to the 1939 Rose Bowl. He was a great basketball player. He was also a great tennis player. Baseball was about his fourth best sport. But out of everybody who was on the list to be considered, Jackie Robinson had the most experience playing integrated sports and suffering the indignities that came with it. So that was one of his advantages. Jackie Robinson also served in the military. And he had the ability to stand up for himself. And he had the ability to take what he felt were positive risks. In fact, when he was a lieutenant in the military, he was court-martialed for not giving up his seat on the bus. So he came to the Dodgers in 1947, and the rest is history. He won Rookie of the Year, turned out to be a great baseball player, won a Most Valuable Player award, helped the Dodgers get to the World Series 6 times. They won once, and was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962. In 1972, he was 52 years old, and he passed away way too young. His body had been ravaged with diabetes. Many people thought that the stress and everything he went through contributed to his early death. His widow, Rachel Robinson, is still alive. In fact, if you watch some of the celebrations last Friday night, she's 99 years old, and she was present at Dodger Stadium to be part of the celebration. So the memories of Jackie Robinson live on, and Rachel Robinson and his daughters are still telling the stories. Now, on the face of it, this is all about Major League Baseball. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, but he had an effect on baseball in all levels. And I'm going to read something from a friend of mine. Michael Wilhite graduated from Oakland High School in the 1970s, an African-American who went on to play baseball and basketball at Columbia University and earned a spot in the Columbia University Hall of Fame. He wrote this on social media last Friday. Today is Jackie Robinson Day, and I'm at Jackie Robinson Park in Harlem as the New York Little League honored his legacy. I am forever grateful for his sacrifice. There is no Columbia University Hall of Fame baseball career for me without Jackie Robinson's sacrifice. I've had a lot of firsts during my lifetime around baseball. Today, April 15th, 2022, I was part of a baseball clinic, and because of baseball, I've maintained lifelong friendships with teammates and competitors. As I reflected on that today, it was easy for me to smile because I was sharing my gift. I couldn't help but think about all those days in Oakland, at Fruitvale, Mount Clair, Allendale, Greenman, Bushrod, Frank Ewell, McConnell, Kenny Park in Berkeley, Rodeo, Richmond, and now creating new memories in Harlem, New York. Michael was a great baseball player. He's a local legend in Oakland. Never had to deal with the color barrier. Never was going to play Major League Baseball. But he was a success story because of Jackie Robinson's sacrifice. So I appreciate all of you allowing me to talk about baseball, allowing me to talk about leadership lessons. And I hope you think about this from your own interest. Not everybody likes baseball. That's my passion. But think of your passion. Is it the arts? Is it travel? Is it the outdoors? Whatever it is, I encourage you to dig a little deeper into it. And I bet you'll find some leadership lessons that you can pass along. Back to you, Mark. I think you're on mute.
Yep.
I think Neil is unmuting us.
Great.
Are there any questions for Steve?
What, Steve, one of the main, you mentioned Oakland High School, that I did go, and I lived in the area, but the big school there was McClymonds. When you played McClymonds High School, which was downtown Oakland, you played some pros. And many of those gentlemen went into baseball, and that we still see them. But they were good in all sports. In my own case, they didn't have tennis at my high school, but I did play the Army and then the U.S. Open and the National Clay Courts. And Army wanted me to go swimming. So, and we had Zoe Olson from Oakland High School also. So we had a lot of athletes. I wasn't their top athlete, but McClymonds High School was.
I'll tell you what, I found a book, and if you've got a pencil, write this down. Oakland, California, the city that changed the face of sports, by Paul Brecky Miser. And there's he wrote about a 300-page book, and he talked about McClymonds, and that would be Bill Russell, Frank Robinson, who are both Hall of Famers and two of the greatest winners ever. He talked about Oakland High School. He talked about Oakland Tech with Ricky Henderson, John Brody. Another one that went to Oakland High School was Jackie Jensen, the Cal baseball and football star that went on to greatness. But if you want to find a good book, that's a great book. And it goes from over 100 years ago to maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, when they were talking about people like Gary Payton in the NBA. And of course, Ricky Henderson and Dave Stewart. So good, very good point. Anybody else?
Appears to be it. Again, thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it. Very interesting.
All right. Thank you very much. If I could share the screen one more time. If anybody would like to get in touch with me, anything else they'd like to talk about, that's my email, my Twitter, and then the website for the radio show. And I just really thank you for being here, and let's keep in touch. And thanks a lot, Mark and Gary, and thank you, Neil, for helping with the tech work.
Very good. Thank you. And if you do want to follow up on that, I know Gary Bundy would have his contact information, and Mark Lucho presumably does also. Thank you very much. Okay.
Have a great day.
Thank you. That concludes the program for today. Unless there's anything else for the good of the order, the meeting is adjourned.